Welcome to Spoonful of Strength, a podcast for people with chronic illness and the ones who love them.
The compassion that you guys have really shines through.
Rachel and Tina cultivate a sense of comfort.
It was such a rewarding experience.
They were great hosts.
It was amazing. You are so kind.
Spoonful of Strength has given us this great platform.
They were so welcoming.
Here are your hosts, Rachel and Tina.
Welcome to Spoonful of Strength. We're so happy that you're here today for a super-sized episode. We're changing things up a little bit for this episode as we are interviewing two different spoonies from different parts of the world with the same illness, and we're going to see how their stories are different. Both of these wonderful ladies have Chiari Malformation, which we have discussed on the season 1, but we wanted to see how their stories differed being in different parts of the world. And we're really excited to get to know both Kristina and Joanne today. How has your week been, Tina?
It's been all right. How about yours?
It's been okay. Definitely had some fatigue hitting me the last 4 or 5 days, but I've got a appointment with my neurologist tomorrow, and so hopefully we'll get some information. I had a test done 3 or 4 weeks ago, an EMG, and hopefully we'll get the results from that back, and that will show a little bit more about muscle weakness and things like that. But you're busy getting ready for your fly ball.
Can-Am will be over by the time this airs, I believe.
Yeah.
But busy trying to get we're doing extra practices with our dogs, and then I'm vending, and then I'm making special, team shirts for everybody. So, and I'm, less than 3 week countdown on there. So I'm just trying to keep myself focused and plugging along while life keeps throwing some monkey wrenches my way.
Yeah. But do need to point out that Tina designed the t-shirt for the Can-Am Classic and actually won first place in the design. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So all of the merchandise that they sell, the t-shirts and sweatshirts and such that they sell for the event, which is the world's largest flyball tournament that takes place in Indianapolis on Columbus Day weekend. It's a little strange when I just did my shopping on the logo shop last week to see my design on all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a great design. And if any of you haven't heard of flyball or don't know what that is, go on YouTube, just put dog flyball. It is the funnest thing I'd love watching this. So, get on there and take a look at flyball if you haven't heard of it before, because it's such a cool sport with dogs. And I always say my dogs would never do well. I've got 2 basset hounds, would never do well with that. They would be too interested in laying down and laying on their back and wanting belly rubs than running down lanes getting tennis balls. So real fun event.
They and actually another this year, well, I guess 2025, in February 2025, the big Westminster Dog Show in New York City, which is, I believe I read, is the second oldest dog show out there, next to, I believe, Crofts over in Europe. And they are actually showcasing flyball. So they're doing a limited tournament there in conjunction with the big Westminster Dog Show in February. And our team actually, total luck of the draw, but we got in. So we are all going to be, or not all of us, but about half the team is going to be heading up to the Westminster Dog Show come February. So we're all really excited about that too.
You're going up?
I'm going up. I'm going up. Yeah,
Oh.
Yogi will be. Yeah, my running joke is Yogi. I have a sheepadoodle Yogi, so obviously he's a mixed breed. So I'm joking, saying this is the only opportunity that he'll ever have to step foot inside the Westminster Dog Show as a mixed breed. So so we'll be heading up to New York City come February for that.
Oh, that's awesome. Good. Good.
So that was pretty exciting news for us.
Yeah. Good. Well, do you want to bring Kristina in?
Yes, absolutely.
So welcome, Kristina, to the podcast. We're really excited to have you on today. And I wish this podcast was video because you got your cute baby Colby daughter in your arms, sleeping away. So we're really excited to have you on today. So first, let's just have you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So I'm Kristina. I have my 4-month-old with me. I am a Chiari and Syringomyelia survivor, conqueror. I kind of use both of those words. I've been a teacher for the last several years and just recently moved from Florida up to Georgia. So I also was diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety and depression over the last several years. So have a little bit of a lot of stuff going on.
What do you teach?
I taught kindergarten.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
That's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. So I just, I stopped when I had my daughter and we'll eventually go back into the classroom, but just taking some time right now.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about when you first started realizing that something was going on?
So March 2010, actually, it was right after my birthday. I had just turned 15 and kind of started with headaches and stomach aches and just unexplainable. Like they would just come and go, and it was very weird. And we tried different medications and just different things. And then I started getting really weak, and my legs got really weak. I was dizzy all the time. I was lightheaded. And going through different doctors, had different tests run, and they thought it was autoimmune. I had worlds of just kind of diagnoses thrown at me. A lot of doctors said it was all in my head and I was making things up and different things like that. So that kind of continued for a few months. And the doctors had done MRIs and CAT scans and all the things, and had discovered my Chiari and my Syringomyelia, but the Chiari wasn't very large. So according to textbooks at that time, and even still now, it shouldn't have presented with symptoms, technically, so they just kind of ignored that and went every other route that we could have. Then eventually it became full-on paralysis. I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't move my legs. My parents had to help me move, but I was also hypersensitive. So they would help pick up my legs to move me, but every time they touched me, I would cry in pain because my nerves were just all over the place. So that was kind of where I was at for a few months. And again, doctors kept dismissing Chiari. They were like, no, that's not it. It's got to be something else. And once all other options were exhausted, we had found a surgeon who, like I said, exhausted all other options, and then was like, all right, this has got to be it because nothing else is helping, nothing else is working. And then October of 2010, I wound up having my brain and spinal cord surgery that corrected the Chiari and corrected the Syringomyelia. And within a week, I was able to move again. So
wow.
It's crazy.
That must have been hard at 15 years old to be dealing with all of that. Did you have a good support system in your parents? I mean, were they helping you to try and figure out what was going on?
Oh, yeah. My mom was a huge, huge advocate for me. And she, like, my records were all over the country. I think she got in touch with surgeons in Seattle and Boston and all over the place. And yeah, I had a huge support system in my family, and I was a dancer at the time, and my dance family stepped up and, really helped us through that as well. So the support system was incredible, as well as the doctors. Once we finally found the doctors that, believed me and were able to do the things that they did to help, the doctors at my hospital were incredible as well.
Sounds like you had a lot of doctors who were like, by the book. If it doesn't fit, then we're not looking elsewhere, and it has to be something else. And
yes,
we find that with a lot of chronic illnesses as well. I have MS, and it fits into that too. Sometimes people say, well, you have to have this many flares and all of that for it to be MS, or and that's just frustrating. So I'm glad that you had a good support system.
Yeah. It's incredible. Things just vary so much, symptoms and with different people and different ages and everything like that. So to me, yeah, it's good to have guidelines, but you got to be a little flexible,
Mm-hmm.
So now you mentioned that you weren't attending school while you were going through initially when you were wheelchair bound and such. Were you still keeping up on the schoolwork from home, or once you were better, you had to start over?
Yeah, yes and no. I was also in so much pain that it was really hard for me to focus. So I was enrolled in hospital homebound after my surgery. During the time that so from like March 2010 to the end of that school year, so May, I did enough to get by, and my teachers really worked with me. Whereas I didn't do as many assignments as my fellow classmates. I was still enrolled, but I wasn't going to class. And then hospital homebound started, like I said, once I got home from surgery, and that continued. And then actually the January after my surgery, I only went to school part-time. So I went to high school for 3 classes a day and then came home because it was just a lot physically for me to be up and moving all day, every day. Mm-hmm. But then by the following August, I was all caught up and I was able to graduate high school with my original class, which now looking back, I'm like, I don't know how I did that, but got it done.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think anybody who has been through what you've been through is obviously a warrior. So to look back and say, how did I do that? You've been through so much worse than getting through high school. But
that's true.
Now, we've talked to a few other Chiari warriors on our first season, and I don't recall that. So the pain that you talked about, the oversensitivity to pain, is that with the
cerebomyelina?
Yeah, I didn't have it in front of me either to read it off.
Yeah, it could have been. It is also a symptom of Chiari too. So
okay.
Yeah, the symptoms of Chiari vary so much. And then the cerebomyelina definitely didn't help, so it could have been a little bit of both. It's hard to kind of pinpoint, but yeah, the sensitivity was rough, especially ones that went up to my arms. Originally it was just waist down. I was paralyzed and highly sensitive. And then over the weeks and months, it went up. And they say with cerebomyelina, your symptoms, if you do have paralysis, it can go up to where the cyst is in your spinal cord. So my cyst was in the cervical vertebrae, so the symptoms kind of went up to that point in my body. Whereas if it was a little bit lower, it might have stopped, a little bit lower.
Join Spoonful of Strength on Instagram, a community open to everyone. Whether you have a chronic illness or support someone who does, you are welcome at Spoonful of Strength. You'll get preview clips of the upcoming episodes and insight into my world as a spoonie. That's Spoonful of Strength, Spoonful with 2 L's, on Instagram. So how long were you in a wheelchair? Like how long, once you started having that paralysis, how long until you actually got to the doctor that said, okay, this is what we're dealing with?
It was about 6 months. Okay. Yeah. I did go through and autoimmune treatment. So I had IVIG for 3 days in the hospital, and it was a heavy dose, and actually it worked for 10 days. Like I got my mobility back for 10 days. I still don't know why or how that even happened. But then 10 days later, I couldn't move again. So that was like a 10-day break within those 6 months. But yeah, it was 6 months in a wheelchair.
Oh.
Yeah.
And once you had the surgery, what was the recovery like? I imagine a lot of PT and such, or?
Yeah. So I had the surgery on October 7th. So I call that my Anna surgery. And about a week after, or maybe it was a couple days, I don't know, the first week or so was a little hazy, but I was able to move my legs and slowly start to move some of my body. And then I was in the hospital for a month with intense physical therapy and occupational therapy. And then I was finally able to go home, but I went outpatient PT and OT for my surgery was in October. I think I finally graduated from therapy in January or February. So it was a good couple months of just intense, 3-4 times a week therapy, exercises at home, because my muscles had atrophied a lot. So just to kind of build up that muscle tone again. But I actually bounced back a lot quicker than my surgeon had anticipated. So that was really cool. And actually that same month, he did 2 other Chiari surgeries, and one person didn't have any improvement at all. One person had partial improvement, and then I had full recovery. So it's just crazy how, we had similar things, same surgery, and the recovery just varies so much. So I'm so lucky that I put in the work at that time, and, I had a good system in place that helped me recover the way that I did.
We talked a little bit about your physical recovery, but the mental part, describe like the mental part of not only waiting for that diagnosis, but also having to go through the surgery and being as young as you were. What was the mental part like?
Mental part was really rough. I was really depressed, and because I was completely isolated. I mean, I had my family and I had, some friends, but as far as like my school friends, everybody kind of disappeared because I wasn't attending school. So it was a lonely time. I went through a lot of talk therapy at that point too, that helped, but it wasn't actually until a few years later that I realized just how intense that time was in my life and just how much it affected me mentally. So it was around 2012 that I was diagnosed with PTSD, induced anxiety and depression, and started on medications. And I've been going to therapy ever since, because it kind of embedded in me, like I wasn't able to trust my body at that point. So there was so much out of my control, right? Like I couldn't control what the doctors were saying. I couldn't control my own body. Like one day I woke up and I couldn't move, So there was a lot of just distrust that I've slowly been building back up. Yeah, it's really hard. And a lot of times now too, with even medical professionals, I've found myself second guessing them because I had so many second guess me. So I'm a big researcher. So even when I was pregnant with my daughter, my doctor would throw something out. I'm like, let me just research this for a minute. So it mentally has affected me a lot, even now, 14 years later.
You mentioned your surgery, but can you tell us exactly what they did in the surgery?
So I had a craniectomy and a laminectomy. And so what they did with the Chiari is they just kind of got rid of the fluid that was draining out. And then with the syringomyelia, I have a small plastic shunt in my spine. So it just makes sure that the fluid continues to drain. And so hopefully it doesn't get clogged up again.
Do they have an idea of what causes Chiari?
I think it's different for everybody. And it's genetic, or it can be genetic. So actually when I was pregnant with my daughter and we did her anatomy scan, we had to one of the things I wanted to make sure was that she didn't have Chiari, which thank God she does not. But yeah, I think it just varies. A lot of times it's brought on by trauma and that can trigger it. But at the time of my life, the only thing that was truly traumatic, like I wasn't in a car accident, I wasn't in anything like that. My family and I did just make a big move down from New York and we moved to Florida. And so that was a big adjustment and I was just starting high school. You know, there was a lot going on. But even still, they're not really sure that if that is what caused it, per se. I could have just been born with it and something kind of just brought on the symptoms. I do know with a lot of people now that I've done some research, you know, blunt force trauma is something that does cause it, but with me, I don't know. It's just one of those mysteries, I guess.
Yeah. You know, everybody's story is a little bit different of everybody that we've talked to, but there was something that you had said in the information that you sent to us that I want to talk about. And you said it's a strange and terrifying feeling when you can't control what's going on with your own body. And many people think you are making it up because it doesn't make sense to them. And that is a great way to put it. We hear that all the time from people, of just that feeling of, I know something's wrong. So in your case, something's obviously wrong because you had no feeling from the neck down, and just feeling like you're not getting anywhere with doctors. And how was that for you, being so young, of dealing with going to doctors and them basically just saying, we don't know what's wrong with you? It's hard for anybody, but I can imagine for somebody so young, of feeling like nobody's helping me. Like, what's going on in your head during that time?
Yeah, it was really defeating. And I can't even tell you, and even I'm sure you guys know with your diagnoses as well, but like just going to doctors and tests all the time. And it would get really frustrating when sometimes they would run EEGs or EKGs and nothing would show up. Or I had a lot of doctors, as I mentioned previously, but mentioned that I was making it up. And they're like, you're doing it for attention. You know, why don't you want to go to school? And I was like, I love school. So like, that's not it. And so it was really defeating. And then I found myself starting to question myself too. That you have these professionals, right? They studied for years in their field telling you, oh, this isn't right. You're making this up. You're not really feeling this. You can move your legs. Whereas I'm sitting there, no, I can't. And I started to question myself, like, wait a minute, am I making this up? Like, is this in my head? There was a lot that just, it was terrifying. It was confusing all at the same time because it all happened so fast. At the time, it felt really slow, but within, symptoms started in March. By April, I was in a wheelchair. So it was fast, and it was so upsetting, and just, I've done so much therapy over it that, to get it a little less triggering for me. But it's really hard when you're being questioned and doubted. And even I was in a wheelchair, but I was sitting in a wheelchair and I didn't have a cast on. I didn't have any monitors on me. Like if you were to see me sitting in a wheelchair, you're like, oh, okay. Like nothing looked wrong on the outside. But then people would go to touch my leg to help me move and I'd start crying, or I'd have to try and lift up my arms and I'd start crying. So it was really hard and just kind of a weird thing because, again, looking at it, you're like, oh, okay, she's sitting in a wheelchair. Like it didn't make sense.
Right.
And even to some doctors, and it didn't make sense. And so, but it didn't make sense, I think, because a lot of people weren't knowledgeable on Chiari and how much it can vary. I mean, this was 14 years ago. So symptoms it wasn't as known, I feel like now more people are talking about it and more people are diagnosed, but I know I went off on a little tangent, but it was scary just to kind of wrap it all up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I can't imagine going through that as a teenager. And I know you said you did you have, being in high school, if we just have such a different mindset, when we're young, did you have close friends that still came in and checked on you, or do you feel like, because you were involved in dance and everything, did you have a lot of support from friends as well?
Dance wise, yes. School wise, no. And I had just started at that school that previous August, so I was still like making friends, and then it came out a couple months later, right? There were rumors that I was pregnant, and that's why I didn't come to school. There was the whole, welcome to high school. That was just the things that go on in high school. And so it was really hard. I kind of gave up on school-wise friends. And then even when I went back to school, I really didn't socialize with a lot of people because after what I went through, I felt older and more mature than a lot of my classmates. If that makes sense, not to sound like conceited, but it just, the little things that they were all worried about, I was like, why are you worrying about that? Like it just seemed very minuscule. So yeah, I counted on my dance family a lot, but as far as high school friends, no, not really.
Not so much.
Yeah. And I had a lot of friends up in New York too, but they were also up in New York. So it was, they weren't right there with me. So
yeah. You've obviously been through so much, and you had the surgery. And you talked a little bit about your recovery and everything, but what about now? Is Chiari something that they do the surgery and it fixes it, or are you still dealing with symptoms, and will you deal with that, long term?
So I do have a little less feeling in the bottom of my left foot, as like random as that is. So it's still a little tingly there. I do get Chiari headaches very often. They're not even migraines. Sometimes they're worse than migraines. And so that does happen. I know it can happen with Chiari patients that you can need another surgery, that symptoms can start to come back. I luckily at 14 years out, knock on wood, have not needed anything. I've gone back for a couple of scans over the years when I've started to feel weak or my legs started to feel achy more than usual, but they'll check the Chiari, they check the shunt and everything's fine. I did actually, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was told I had to have a C-section because if I gave birth naturally and I pushed too hard, the shunt in my spine could pop. Yeah. So that was something that we had to take into consideration. And my doctor was so supportive. She was like, you could go natural and it could be fine, but you run that risk of, the shunt popping. So C-section it is. But yeah, so it's something that is still very involved in my life. It's not something that I just kind of shut the door on and don't deal with anything since. But it's definitely not as prominent as it once was at the time, but it's still kind of always there. I realized for a while actually, after my surgery, so all of my neck muscles and shoulder muscles were cut so they could get into my spinal column. And so for a long time, I want to say it was probably like the first 5 years, I would get such bad headaches, probably like once, twice a month, just because my muscles were trying to regroup and reconnect. And so luckily now they're not as bad, and not as often, but when they hit, they're pretty powerful. So yeah, but other than that, as far as like looking at me, and interacting as daily life, you wouldn't be able to tell really anything. Yeah, I was dealing with anything else.
So before going back into those teenage years, before this all happened, I know you were a competitive dancer. After you had your surgery and you were back to being mobile again, did you go back to dancing?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I finished, so that was my sophomore year of college, or high school, I'm sorry. And I danced all the way until I graduated high school. And then once I turned 18 and went to college, I kind of fell off of that. But yeah, I had been dancing since I was 2, so to give it up was huge. And then I slowly went back into it. You know, I would do one routine and then maybe one class a week. And then eventually by my senior year, I think I was back at like 6 or 7 classes a week, just doing it all. So yeah.
You feel like that helped in aiding your recovery and building up that muscle, you know, getting those muscles strong again?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was also a driving force for me too, mentally and socially, like just to kind of get into the dance room again and just run with it. Yeah, so it definitely gave me that push.
So looking back on the whole story, what piece of advice would you give to somebody who is maybe in, whether it be Chiari or something else, but who is in that journey of frustration and not getting answers? What piece of advice would you give to somebody who's struggling, especially mentally?
I definitely say advocate, either for yourself, or if you're not able to, you know, ask somebody to advocate on your behalf for yourself. And kind of listen to your body. The body knows a lot more and is able to communicate a lot more to us than we give it credit for. And so I think just knowing your body is huge. And that's one big takeaway that I've had since then. You know, if I feel things or anything like that, I kind of listen to my body. But I would also just say, like, give yourself grace, because it's a lot to go through something like that. And, you know, you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. But try to have an end goal as well. That was a big thing for me. My big goal was to get to my Sweet 16. I wanted to dance at my Sweet 16. And so that was like a big push for me, and really helped me. And all the doctors and all the nurses knew, like, all right, we got to get this done so she could go, you know, and have her Sweet 16. But yeah, also speak up about your struggles. I know I'm throwing a lot of advice out there, but it's hard, and it's okay that it's hard, and it's okay if you're not okay also. You know, it's all these years later and I still struggle. So I think just try and build a support system and be okay with sometimes not being okay.
Yeah, that's great advice.
It's been such a pleasure. And it's just such I always love meeting everybody and hearing their stories and how to overcome everything that you've been through is just inspiring.
And we're so glad that you were able to get some relief, and you've got a beautiful baby to show off. Is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners?
No, I don't think so. I think we kind of covered everything.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that you guys are doing this. This is amazing.
Oh, good. We're having fun with it.
Yeah.
We are.
I think it's a big part of our healing of everything that both of us deal with too.
Yeah. I had felt the same way, like just sharing it and just sharing your story and talking about your story. And I actually talked about my medical journey on another podcast as well. And that was the first podcast I ever did. And I was like, oh, I feel so good after, like just to talk and know that you're not alone. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yep. Definitely for other chronic illness warriors as well, because, you know, sharing or talking about your story to people who have never been there, you know, it's I feel like they don't necessarily always understand. And if you talk about it, and if it's the same group of people, you start feeling like, oh, they've got to be getting tired of listening to me yammer on about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's something in a group of people with chronic illness that you just have so much compassion and empathy that sometimes you don't get with your family or friends. And to be able to share your struggles or your wins is good to just have that love, you know. So it's definitely been good for us, and we couldn't have done it without people like you that want to share your story and come on here. So we can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thank you guys for giving me this opportunity. This has been awesome.
That was great, Kristina, to share. Everybody's journey is slightly different. So here's Joanne, you know, sharing her experience. thank you so much for joining us today, Joanne. And you agreed to share your story on your journey with Chiari. So thank you so much for coming on. And can you share a little bit about yourself with our listeners?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me on. My name's Joanne, obviously. I'm 53 years old, or years young. Feel about 80 most days.
Yeah.
I live in North Wales in the UK, and I've got 2 boys that have left home now. One's married, one's got a long-term partner, and I'm here with my husband and 2 Yorkshire Terriers. So meant to be having our time when the children have left home, but it's not quite worked out that way.
Yeah. I've got 2 that have left home and one just turned 18. So I'm almost there with you.
Yeah.
But so we're going to talk about your journey with Chiari today. So can you start out by just telling us a little bit about how everything started, what those first symptoms and what kind of alerted you that something was wrong?
So basically with Chiari, you might have seen slogans going around, too much brain to contain and that sort of thing. It's basically that your brain is too big for your skull. Now, it could be that you were born with it, or it could be something that's happened as you've been growing up, like an injury, an accident. But basically, at the back of your brain, you have 2 tonsils, and they drop down out of the bottom of your skull and drop down into your spinal canal, which they shouldn't. So because of that, your brain stem is compressed, but also your spinal column is compressed, and that brings lots of associated problems with it. So it depends which part of the spinal column is compressed as to where you'll experience your problems, which makes it quite hard to diagnose, really. So mine started, I couldn't tell you an actual year it started, but looking back, I always had problems. For example, when I was, sorry, just blowing off, when I was young, people used to say, "Oh, is something wrong with your neck? You've got a stiff neck." Well, I just thought they were being rude, basically. I thought I haven't got anything wrong with my neck. Little did I know. So yeah, the problems started cropping up sort of throughout teenage years, really, into early adults. For example, I'd have problems with my stomach, and I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. But since my decompression, I've not had any problems at all with my bowel. So now we think it was all to do with the Chiari. So, but it started getting really bad about 2015. I would say then it was noticeable that there was something majorly wrong. I remember being at my cousin's wedding, and I was a bridesmaid, and I'd got ready. I'd got my cousin ready, no problems at all, gone to the wedding, had the photographs, had the meal, everything had gone fine. And then at the night do, Bon Jovi came on, Living with a Prayer. Now that is mine and my husband's signature dance. If we're ever at a do, that is what we dance to. So I grabbed him and said, "Come on, let's go dance." I got on the dance floor and I just felt this horrid pain in my head, like this pressure. And I just felt like I was going to collapse. So I grabbed hold of Andrew, my husband, and I said, "I'm going to collapse here." And my mum, bless her, she's passed on now, but she didn't realise that it was so bad. And she said, "Come and sit down. You're a bridesmaid. Stop making a fuss." So that was that. I sat down, and it just wouldn't shift. And we ended up having to leave the function early. And that sort of set the tone for the next few years, really. If ever we went somewhere, we would, 9 times out of 10, we would be leaving early because this pain would come on, or I'd be feeling sick or weak or in danger of collapsing, So that's just how it progressed, really.
Was there a specific moment that they finally started digging more into what was causing your pain, or was it just over the years?
Yeah, I would go to the doctor. I went to the doctors it was about 10 years in the end. I was backwards and forwards to the doctors. And I would say, I've got a problem with my head, I've got a problem with my neck. And I was basically told, go to physio, drink less coffee, drink more water, try chiropractor. Now, anyone with Chiari knows that if you go to a chiropractor, it can be fatal because they're manipulating the bones over where your brain's sitting, basically. So, and then I was choking on my food, and I was starting eating in the bedroom because I was embarrassed, frankly. It didn't matter if it was soft food or dried food or potatoes or ice cream. Didn't matter. I was choking, and it was embarrassing. So my husband and the children didn't really know how bad it was until we went on a family holiday. And then we were sat at the meal in the restaurant, and I would be choking. And they were quite horrified, really, to see just how bad it was. So Andrew said, you've got to go to the doctors when we get back. You've no more, I said, well, they're just going to put me off again and tell me to go to physio or something. He said, no, we're going to the doctors. We're not taking no for an answer this time. So we went, and I said that I was choking, and she did no more than pull a leaflet out for throat cancer. And she ordered tests to have cameras down my throat. And I said, is this necessary? I've got no symptoms in my throat. It's just that I'm choking. I've got no pain. There's no lumps. Oh no, it's just a routine, just going through the motions sort of thing. But it was scary. It was a scary time. So finally we were getting people sort of, pardon the pun, putting their neck on the line to give me a diagnosis, and they were scary. I ended up having cameras up and down and every orifice and everything. It's your dignity as well just goes, and you've just got to trust in the doctors that they know what they're doing. I mean, luckily over here we have the NHS, so it was all free for me. But if I'd had to pay for all the exams I'd had and all the tests, I dread to think.
Now, throughout this time, were you having the Chiari headaches as well as the choking and all that?
Yeah. It was like layering effect. I would have the head pain, and then some days I would have weakness in the limbs. Some days I would have the choking, but the head pain was always there, really. So if I was still at work at that point, but I was basically dosing myself up on painkillers just to get through the day at work, and then coming home and going to bed. So I hardly saw the family at all. But I just wasn't getting any answers, and it's, you feel at your wit's end, you really do. But I'd be getting ready in the morning, and this intense crushing pain would come on in my head, and I'd think, oh, I'm holding my neck funny, putting my mascara on or something, or you just look for any explanation as to why it was, so painful.
How long did it take for you to actually get an MRI or a CT or something of your head once you started having like the headaches and things?
Well, the incident with the wedding, my cousin's wedding, was 2014, 2015. And then when I finally collapsed and went into hospital, that was 2018. So that intense period was 3 years, but it had been going on for about 10 years before that, where I'd been back and forward to the GP. But it did actually take, I remember thinking, it's going to take for me to collapse here for someone to take this seriously. And it ended up, it did. I collapsed. It was the Easter weekend, and I was sat with my husband on the settee, and we were just looking at videos on Facebook and Instagram and what have you. And he said, look at this. This is a funny video. So I watched it and I started laughing and I just collapsed into him, slumped down, and I just couldn't get up. He said, "Come on, get up now. Enough's enough." And I just could not move. The pain on the back of my head was just so intense, I couldn't move. So he said, "Right, that's it. We're going to A&E." So we went to A&E, because that was actually the first time we'd been to A&E with it, I think. We'd just been to the doctor, and the doctors had said, physio, drink water, and you take their word for it, So it's the first time we'd actually been to A&E. And luckily we saw this really young, keen doctor straight out of medical school who wanted to run every single test there was. So lucky that she was on shift. And she did lumbar punctures, CTs, bloods, all sorts of examinations. And her consultant came round after a couple of days and said, "Oh, you still here?" And I said, "Yep, still here. Don't know what's up with me." So I went over everything and she said, "I think we need to get an MRI scan. I think I might know what the issue is." And that was it. That's how it was diagnosed. Just by chance that consultant was on duty that day.
While you're on your phone, come on, I know it's in your hand. Head on over to Spoonful of Strength's Etsy shop at spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. That's spoonful with 2 L's. We have a wide variety of t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, mugs, and so much more. Anything in the shop can be customized based on your illness. We have sizes from extra small to 5X and many colors to choose from. The best part is most items ship within 2 business days. So head on over to spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com.
I imagine that was after all these years of not knowing what was going on and not necessarily feeling heard with finding the answers. Was that a bit of a relief to feel like you finally figured out what it is and kind of have a battle plan, so to speak?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was such a scary thing to be told. They basically sent a young registrar to see me to tell me the results while I was eating my dinner one day. And he just said, "Oh, you've got a problem with your brain. You're going to need surgery. You've got to go to the neurocentre. Someone will be in touch." And then just walked away. And I'm sat there having my dinner, having a sandwich, and I'm like, "Say what? What's going on?" And I asked the nurse, and she didn't know. She said, "Oh, it's something to do with your brain. It'll be easily sorted." I'm like, "Well, what is it?" "Oh, I don't know. I've never heard of it. Some condition I've never heard of. So I'll get someone to come and speak to you." So somebody came later that night, and he basically drew a drawing. Basically, it's just a line drawing of a brain and a dotted line. And it says, "This is where your brain should be. This is where your brain is." And that was it. And he said, "Don't Google anything. You don't want to know all the details. Don't go Googling, and try and relax over the weekend, and we'll see you on Monday." Well, if someone just told you you're going to have brain surgery, the last thing you're going to want to do is relax,
Right.
But there was no information on the internet anyway, hardly. So that was the first seed sown for me to get some information out there. And quite early on, I just thought, something good's got to come of this. That's where I came up with the idea of the book. Because there isn't the information out there. And jumping ahead a little bit, but when we saw the consultant, he said some of the GPs in this country might never see a Chiari in their life, or they might just see it once. Yeah. So that's why it's so hard to diagnose.
Has your issue with choking, has that resolved?
Yeah, I get the odd occasion, but yeah, that has resolved. It caused problems after my decompression because I ended up in ITU because they didn't check my swallowing reflex after the operation. So when I was back on the ward and they were bringing me cups of tea and then they said, try some soup, it was going down into my lungs. So I ended up in respiratory failure because all the fluid was going into my lung rather than my stomach. So they've changed the policy now. They don't they put an NG tube down everybody and they don't take it out until they've checked your swallow reflex. So at least something good's come out of my journey.
Yeah. What was the recovery like after your surgery?
It was different. I've had 2 decompressions and it was different both times. And this is a message I want to get across as well, that everybody, even though we might have Chiari, everybody's journey is different because it depends how much you compressed and it depends how much your brain has gone down into your spinal canal. So my recovery from the first surgery, I was in hospital for a month. I was in ITU for about 10 days. And then I had to sort of recovering from the pneumonia. And then I had to really start recovering from the decompression then, once I was back on the normal ward. But my second decompression, I was out of hospital in 5 days. They came to see me and said, you can go home. I said, I can't go home. I haven't got a suitcase. So they said, well, we'll give you some carrier bags. I said, I'm not leaving here with all my belongings in carrier bags like some bag lady. No, I wanted I don't know where I got my stubbornness from. But so I sent my dad up to the local shop up the road to get me a suitcase.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
We were just so unprepared for it.
Yeah.
You know, going off the first one where it had been a month to be told after 5 days, it was that was quite a shock.
Yeah.
But it just shows you, you know, it's different journeys.
Yeah. So you've had 2 decompression surgeries. So my question is kind of twofold. Can you explain what a decompression surgery is and why you had to have a second one? Is this something that you could keep having to have surgeries for, or is there any time where it's fixed?
Right. Decompression is a surgery that is offered to some people that have Chiari's as a way of pausing your symptoms. It's not a cure. There's no fix for the Chiari. You'll always have the Chiari and you're always at risk from complications, as it were. But the best chance you've got of pausing your symptoms is to have a decompression if it's offered to you. What I did find out was that the surgeons won't offer it if it's not necessary. So if you are offered it, seriously think about it. So basically what they do is they take some space at the bottom of the skull and they take a bone at the top of the neck, and that's going to create more room for your brain and for your brain stem. And it also means that the fluid can flow around your brain. Because when your brains drop down into your spine, it forms like a plug. So the CSF, the fluid around your brain, needs to flow, and it can't flow because you've got this plug-in effect. So the decompression removes some bone and restores that flow. But in my case, the first one, the tonsils were actually stuck to my spinal canal. So they had to, sorry if this is too much information, they had to basically peel them off my spine, which took, quite a while. And the consultant said afterwards, he said, "Why did you leave it so long? You made it very tricky for me." It was one of the worst ones he'd seen. And he says, "Why did you leave it so long?" I said, "It's not for lack of trying." I said, "We were back and forwards to the GP for 10 years. It's not something we did on purpose." Yeah. So yeah, and then so I had the first one in the June, and by the September I was back in hospital showing a lot of the original symptoms. So I had another MRI scan at my local hospital, and they said it's failed. You need to go back to the neuro centre. So they had to take me in an ambulance because I was at risk of stopping breathing again. They had to take me in an ambulance down to the neuro centre, which is about an hour in the back of an ambulance. And yeah, when I got there, they just said, it's failed. I'm sorry, you need to have it done again. And that brought on so many sort of strange feelings that I didn't expect. I felt selfish having to have a second operation because I was going off the first one and what the recovery had been like and how my boys had been. They were at uni at the time, but how they'd been coming to see me and how upsetting it must have been. I didn't remember a lot of ITU, thankfully, but they did. So I remember saying to the consultant, I think I'm being selfish having a second one. I'm happy staying as I am. I can sit on the settee, I can watch telly, I can hold Andrew's hand. What else do I need? So he said, I don't think you're being selfish at all. I think you're being, quite brave, really. And you need it, else I wouldn't suggest it. So there was a lot of deliberation, and I chat to some of the specialist nurses because it's good to get as much information as you can. And obviously I was traumatised because of the first operation, but they assured me that it shouldn't happen again. They were taking steps now with the NG tube, the nasogastric tube, to put that down while I was in surgery. So it shouldn't happen again at all. To go ahead. So the second surgery, same thing. He took a bit more bone, but he also put a plate in. So he sort of hitched the brain up, if you will, and put a plate in, a patch and a titanium plate to hold the brain up in place. So it shouldn't, fingers crossed, it shouldn't slump down again. But there's no guarantee. Yeah. Nobody says, it's never going to happen again.
Right.
How long ago was that second surgery?
That was 2019.
2019.
Yeah, so we're 5 years in. So, but something I want to do actually, because when I was sort of thinking over a lot of this again, ready for today, I was thinking, have they spoken to anyone that's 20 years down the line? Do we know how long these things are going to last? I don't know. I'd like to do some research on it, really. Yeah. Because if it's quite a new thing that's being picked up, we're not going to know, are we, how people are 20, 30 years down the line?
Yeah. I think the people we've talked to were maybe within 10 years. But a lot of the people that we talk to, the lumbar puncture or the surgery, a lot of times we've seen CFS leaks happen.
Yeah.
So you didn't have an issue with any leaks or anything that would cause additional
thankfully issues? No.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
But
well, you mentioned something interesting in that the longevity of the procedure that you had and how long it takes. So have you made the realization, I guess, that it sounds like that's somewhat of a new technique. So you actually are helping form that data point of, 20 years from now, it'll be like, oh, look at this Joanne over in, North Wales. She's been like 25 years out. So one of the first people to have that done. So
yeah,
how does that sit with you as kind of being more of a, on the cutting edge of.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought that really. I do wonder just how much, how advanced we are in this country. I don't know compared to others. I know in Barcelona they have a specialised institute just for Chiari. Because we're looking at going away next summer, and I said, well, if we go to Barcelona, because I haven't flown since my surgery. So I said, well, if we go to Spain, go to Barcelona, I'll be okay if there's any problems, because I can just go to the institute. Right. Yeah. So I do think some countries are more ahead than others. You have to hand your body over. You can't think too much into it, else you just drive yourself potty, and especially when I'd been in ITU and lost like muscle strength and what have you, and I was having to have bed baths, and you've just got to just lie there and let them get on with it. And it's not humiliating at first because you're not that aware, you're not that with it yet, you're still in so much pain that they've got to do it. But once you sort of once it switches to you being aware and being more conscious of your surroundings, then you think, hang on a minute, I'm naked here having a bed bath. How's this happened? And it's surreal. It really is. And when you go down for the surgeries, I with the first one, I made the conscious thing that I wasn't going to get upset. One, because it would have upset my family seeing me in tears, but also I thought there's no point. They've said I need the surgery. If I don't have the surgery, I'm going to die. Simple as that. So why get upset? Just let them get on with it and concentrate on recovery,
Yeah. So your last decompression surgery, you said, was 2019, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is your life like now, as far as, has it completely taken away your symptoms? Are you still having some issues, or what's your life like now?
Yeah, I do still have symptoms. They're different to what they were before decompression. I don't tend to get the choking. I'm definitely not stopping breathing, because I was doing that while I was sleeping. I've been left with weakness in my right arm and my right leg because of the nerve damage. And what they do say is, after a decompression, you're healing up till 2 years. And then at that 2-year point, that's as good as you're going to get. They don't say whether you'll get worse again, or that's what we don't know about the longevity. But they say that at 2 years, that's as good as you're going to get. So this weakness I've got in my limbs, I'm stuck with that, basically. The main thing is absolutely horrendous fatigue. Some days I can't get out of bed some days. And like we've done this today, I won't be able to do anything else today, and probably tomorrow either. But it's just all about planning, I guess. And, when you're going through your calendar, just try and put something in for every other day or every 2 days. But a couple of weeks ago, we had a lovely weekend in the Lake District for our anniversary. And it took me about 4 or 5 days to get over it. But we had a brilliant time. You've just got to offset it, haven't you? And decide what's important. You could sit there, do nothing every day, and then you wouldn't get the peaks and troughs, I suppose. But it's nice to treat yourself every now and again, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely. So you mentioned that you have a book out. Tell our listeners a little bit about your book, where we can find it, what inspired you to put that out there.
So I know the listeners can't see it, but so it's called Chiari and Me. It's not just a headache, because I was fed up of going to the doctors and them saying, oh yes, it's a migraine, we get migraines. And I was thinking, no, it's not just a headache. So that's where the title has come from. And then on the front of the book, you would see there's a lady with her head in her hands and this sort of confusion over her, and this web of just pain and disillusionment. And I guess early on, really, I decided I wanted to write the book because there wasn't information on the web, on the internet, that I wanted to read. There was a lot of medical information, and there was a lot of scary information. There was a lot of scary Facebook groups where people were talking about DNRs, and which I did not want to read, not when I was about to go into brain surgery. So I wanted just good, solid information from someone that knew about the surgery and knew about the condition. And I thought, right, I'll have to write it myself because it just wasn't there. And we decided as well to the book's taken the form of diaries, really. It's my diaries of my first surgery and my second decompression, but also of Andrew's, because I think that's important. People forget about the partner. And when Andrew was told that I had to have brain surgery, he just felt so helpless. He didn't understand the condition. He didn't know what I was going to be having done. When we went into the pre-assessment clinic where they check that your heart's okay in your lungs and what have you, ready for your surgery, the specialist nurse started explaining what the surgery was going to be and what they would do in the operation. Andrew went absolutely green. He had to be taken out and given a glass of water. You know, I'm like, it's my brain they're operating on, and you're the one that's getting all the attention. How does that happen? So yeah, if the information's not told in the right way, it can it can totally affect you. So that's what we were conscious of doing. So it's got Andrew's diaries in there from both the surgeries to show the difference as well between a surgery that didn't go too well and then a surgery that I was out after 5 days. And also it's got lists in there of things that you need to take in with you when you go into hospital. Because you get given a booklet and it'll have a little list in saying, oh, you got to take a towel and a flannel and a pair of slippers. Well, where's the useful stuff? Where's the earplugs because the ward's noisy? Where's the eye mask because lights have got to be incredibly bright on a neurology ward? Where's the long charging lead for your mobile? So, because you're not going to be able to get out of bed to plug it in. So it's all that kind of thing as well, just full of information for anyone that's going into surgery really, or into hospital for a long stay, not just Chiari, any sort of condition. I know somebody that's read the book because her son was diagnosed with a different brain and nerve condition and had to have spinal procedure, and she bought my book and she found it really, really useful. Because it gave her an insight as to what her son was going to go through. So that was nice to get feedback like that.
Yeah. I've got it up. I'm going to order it today, and because it sounds just fascinating. And we'll put the link in the podcast description so that people can reach out and have an easy access to be able to order that.
Thank you.
And so we will definitely do that. We just can't thank you enough for coming on here. I know it's such a sacrifice for you to take time out to do this, knowing that it's going to, set you back and have to recover. And so it means a lot to both of us that you've taken time out of your day and taken the energy that you need so much to be able to sit with us today and talk about it.
We appreciate you coming on. It just floors me the things that all of our chronic warriors go through, and I appreciate you sharing your story and putting it out there in the form of a book.
Thank you for letting me onto your podcast, and putting it out there, you know. And I know you've spoken to a couple of other Chiari warriors, as we call ourselves, but it doesn't hurt to have another sort of side of the story, does it really? So thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to put that out there.
What a nice lady.
I know. And it's so interesting, the different, that's, even though we have talked to quite a few Chiari people, she's the first one that has had that type of surgery that we've chatted with.
Tina, I'm so glad that we decided to have more than one Spoonie story on one episode, because it truly does show what a complete difference one patient is from another within the same illness.
Right.
Just completely different stories, and from different parts of the world as well. What do you think?
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to find out. I had noticed that on episode 1 with the MS patient in Australia, how differently each country the options among different countries and different areas are.
Yeah, because the one difference that I heard from her that I haven't heard from anybody else is the plate they put in her head, in her skull.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense. And you wonder why that maybe it is practiced here, but the people we've spoke with, I don't remember any of them mentioning anything like that. It seems to be almost like a possible permanent fix.
Right.
And I know that she mentioned, everything that she had done was free. That's a big one as well, just because I know for a lot of us, financially, sometimes you have to make a decision on, do I get this done? But it costs so much that you're almost gambling on what you do and what you don't do with your health because of financial issues. So that was also something quite different.
Yeah. And that's a tough, I always feel bad about people who have to make decisions on, like, nobody should have to make a decision on receiving a treatment that could potentially help them or not based on pure cost reasons. That's, you can't put a price tag on your quality of life.
Yeah. There was a time years ago, kids were little, we were pinching pennies. This is before I even had MS, where I was rationing insulin and rationing pump supplies because they were so expensive, and reusing things that are one time only, or extending, my insulin pump had to be replaced every 3 to 4 days. I was going up to 7 days just to try and get my money's worth from the insulin and the pump supplies. And so it's definitely amazing. But I think that we can both agree on one thing. Both of these ladies were just wonderful individuals. I mean, let's talk about Kristina for a second. Talk about somebody who's had to deal with Chiari at a very young age and having complete paralysis, and trying to get those answers and having to advocate to finally get her diagnosis, and all the high school things that you do, and having to miss out on school and all of that. It's a lot to deal with for a young woman.
Especially those teenage years, and she was a competitive dancer and had to give up the things that at that point what were some of the most important pieces of her teenage years.
Definitely. And missing out on quite a lot of things, I imagine. And thank goodness that she was able to regain her mobility. I don't know if that would have been an option, if they wouldn't have found what was going on, that would have been able to be reversed like it was. And so, I think with Kristina, it was just a very strong-willed teenager at that point. And I just thought her story was beautiful, and the mental health part of it, being that young and dealing with all the surgeries and missing out on things. And she really brought up the mental health part of it, which is, I think we talked about that sometimes the mental journey can be just as hard as the physical journey.
Absolutely. If not more so. Especially when you have something that you're going through procedures or you're dealing with as the symptoms flare up, where you're not as physically active, then a lot of times that gives your brain a little bit too much free time to get inside your own head, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even imagine it, being in high school and being in a wheelchair and having no feeling, how scary that would be for anybody, much less somebody in their teens. And now she's got a beautiful baby, Colby, and who we got to see on the Zoom chat. So happy that she has recovered as much as she has. I mean, obviously she still has symptoms and everything, but thank goodness they were able to, get her out of that wheelchair and have her, be able to start a family and all of that is just a great, great story. I really enjoyed talking with her.
Yeah. And then, and the Joanne is also just amazing. I can't imagine, 10 years of just feeling like, oh, wow, this is how my life is going to be, and not getting the answers, and just essentially reaching that point of, I don't know, maybe just giving up the hope of ever really finding out what's going on.
Yeah. And I was a little bit shocked at the fact when she talked about when she'd gone to the emergency room, and not the doctors, but other people are basically telling her she's got something in her brain and she's going to need brain surgery, and kind of leaving it at that, to have that piece of information without all the details would, for me, I couldn't even imagine how frightening that would be, to hear, something's wrong, it's in your brain, you're going to need surgery, but the doctor will let you know at a later time.
We'll talk about it more later.
Yeah. I'm so happy that the second surgery that she went through was a much better recovery, and seems like it's given her a little bit of relief, although she still, has symptoms to this day. It seems to have taken away some of the symptoms she was experiencing. A lot of the spoonies that we've talked to, they always seem to bring up purpose, of what this is teaching me and all of that. And I'm really excited. I'm gonna go on and get her a book right now and read it, because I would love to hear from, the not only her story, but also her husband's story, because I think that can be real interesting to read it from not only a man's perspective, but a husband, and seeing your wife going through all of that.
Now, is that on Amazon? Did you find her book on Amazon?
Yep. It's on Amazon, and they have it in paperback. They have it in a Kindle form. And we'll make sure and link it here, but it's very easy to find.
I'll definitely be downloading it on my Kindle.
Yeah. I think in doing this episode, we've had a lot of people with Chiari come forward and want to tell their story, and we never want to turn anybody away because, oh, we've already covered that, or, anything like that. And we are trying to give a little bit of variety. But I'm so glad that we paired these two women together. I think we didn't even know at the time how vastly different their stories would be, and how it gives us a better look at Chiari by seeing it through the voices of two different women. And so I'm really excited that we did this. Well, our next episode is going to come to you next Tuesday, and we're going to be talking about advocacy. In the first part of the episode, Tina and I are going to talk about being your own advocate, and nowadays, what that looks like. We're also going to get a chance to sit down with Rachel, who has narcolepsy with cataplexy. Now I'll have to figure out what that means. So we're going to have a great week next week, learning a little bit about something we haven't covered before, which is narcolepsy.
Thank you all so much for being our loyal listeners and tuning into our podcasts. We are looking forward to having you join us again next week on the next episode. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to follow the podcast, click on the bell to receive notifications on new episodes, and give us a rating. Feel free to send us a comment on the episode you just listened to. Thank you for being a loyal listener.